Good morning, lovelies. Enduring trials. Let's talk about it. Jesus, coffee. Happy Monday. So, you guys saw I did a reel, maybe you saw I did a reel last week about enduring trials, but that's a 90-second clip. Trials need to be dug into. Yesterday we started into the book of James at church and went through James 1, 1 through 4, talking about what we need to know when we're experiencing the hard, which is trials, right? Tests and trials. So I want to read through that passage and then just kind of break it down. So James, a bondservant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which were scattered abroad. They were scattered because of persecution. They fled because of persecution. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. So, trials, right? So, when you go to the very next book in the Bible, 1 Peter, which was Peter, right? Peter writing this. So not even James, the brother of Jesus. We're talking about Peter, his loved apostle. He talks about in verse 6 in 1 Peter 1. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So James talks about it, and I love James. That whole book is just such a flowing knowledge of just so much wisdom in that book. But trials, right? Two different authors in two consecutive books both talk about trials very early on in the book. Why? Because we face hard times and we face hardships and trials. If you notice there, count it all joy. Did he say if you fall into various trials? No. He said when. When you fall into various trials. Which means they're coming. Jesus didn't promise us an easy life, guys. He told us straight away, trouble will befall you. He was persecuted first. So guess what? Look what happened to the church. Rome came after the church and scattered them in persecution. So James, the half-brother of Jesus, goes on to write, hey, count it all joy. Why are we joyful in a trial? Why? Trials stink. Hardships stink. Why am I going to count it joy? Because it creates endurance. You hear that? Knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience, which is endurance. So God's not preparing you for a sprint. He's preparing you for a marathon. He's preparing you to be able to face things and get through them. When you train for a 5K, you run 100 yards and call it good. Hey, I'm good. I can run 100 yards. I'm good. Right? I don't need to prepare for a 5K. Or, hey, I'm going to go out and run a Spartan, so I'll just run a 5K and I'll be good. Well, yeah, you'll be good while you're running the 5K, except the 20 to 25 obstacles that are in your way. If you go out and train to run, you're not going to be prepared for monkey bars. You're not going to be prepared for 6-foot walls. You're not going to be prepared for barbed wire crawls. You're not going to be prepared for running through the mud. You're not going to be prepared for bucket carries, sandbag carries. You're not going to be prepared for any of that. But hey, I went out and ran a 5K. Yeah, but you didn't prepare for everything else. So guess what? No endurance. It's like if you go out and run 100 yards and you can nail that, you can sprint hard for 100 yards, great. What are you going to do for the rest of that 3 miles? You're not going to be able to get through it. No endurance. You know, think about trials in your life. Think about trials that you've encountered. Matter of fact, even write some down, right? 5 or 6 really tough trials that you've had in your life. I challenge you to do this today. Write 5 or 6 trials you've had. And then as you write those down, sit and think about them. And think about how have you had to depend on God? Because here's the thing, guys, that endurance that it's producing is faith more. It's not more faith as in that mustard seed now becomes a strawberry seed or now becomes, a peach pit or an apple seed. No, it's not larger. It's deeper. It's not a size, it's depth of faith. Because when we encounter those hardships or those trials, that endurance that requires us to be more dependent on God and be dependent on God more often, which means using our faith more often. So again, it's not the size of that seed of faith. It's not the size of our faith. It's the depth of our faith. The more we see him, the more we turn to him. The more we experience him, the easier it is to turn to him. Which, guess what, guys? That's faith. The easier it becomes to turn to God and depend on God, that's faith. Not just in the hard, not just when you're bottomed out, but, hey, my job has gotten hard. I need to depend on God. I've got a friend who's sick. I need to depend on God and turn to God in prayer. Whenever anything, I've got an injury, I've got to turn to God. The more and more you turn to God, the easier and easier it becomes because your faith deepens. Instead of having a kiddie pool of faith, now you've got a deep end. Now you've got 12 feet that you can dive into faith deeper. And eventually that grows to be an ocean. So, so he didn't say if you encourage. It's when you encounter trials. And even in 1 Peter 1:6, he talks about when your faith is tested, it becomes pure faith, right? So in the hard is not your enemy, guys. In the hard is the friend. Challenge you to look at it that way. Hard times are not your enemies. And here's the truth about hard times. In the hard, God is not picking on you. God is not abandoning you, and God has not forgotten you. In the hard, God is growing you. God is deepening your faith. He's testing you and purifying you. It's up to you to see it that way. It's that perspective. You know what, God, I don't like this, but I trust you. And thank you that I get to endure this and I get to encounter this. It's all about your response. Your response equates to your growth. And it equates to the deepening of your faith. So I challenge you, write down 5 or 6 trials you've had in your life. I'll put down some of mine. And, he said something yesterday that really hit me right between the eyes. Matter of fact, I wrote it down on my notes. Hardship produces what the easy won't. Think about that. And I'm going to leave you on that one. He loves you. I know I love you. He loves you like crazy. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever Dad wants to talk about.